Hi, this is KCC from Quest Strategic Capital, and I'm here with Elain Lockman from Ataplast. Let me start by letting you know a little bit more about Elain. Elain is the co-founder and director in Ataplast, a Malaysian registered equity crowdfunding platform with Security Commission. She has served many organizations in her past 20 years career, including Petronas, MDAC, Malaysian Debt Ventures, many organizations. Currently, she sits on the board of Western Union Payment Malaysia and the chairman of the Western Union Internal Audit Committee, while being actively involved with the startup community, advising entrepreneurs in funding, strategy, and operations. She graduated from London School of Economics with a bachelor degree in actuarial science and a master's degree in operational research. So we're here to talk about startups, and I'd like to explain a little bit about what we're doing here. We want to offer content and education for startups because we believe that there's a lot of need for startups to acquire certain knowledge and certain skills that will increase their success in their ventures. Now, what are some of the common problems that you perceived that startups have? What are some of the challenges that you think they faced in their operation and what they want to do?
Yeah, I think for us specifically as an equity crowdfunding platform, I mean, we do get a lot of applications from startup companies, startup businesses. I would say about 90% of our applications and deal pipeline come from
90%.
startups, about 90%. Yeah, and generally our observation is that general weaknesses of these companies, I would say, are coming through from their business plans and coming up with their financial projections.
Okay.
With more sound assumptions, more concrete business plans. That's number one. Number two, also, I would say what's important is that they need to understand having a good management team, to drive through the implementation of the business and rollout of the business operations. But the other thing that we observe is that fundraising. Yeah. So having a clear fundraising strategy actually is important. Right. And having a clear value proposition for investors when it comes to fundraising. And they need to understand different phases of fundraising requirements for different phases of their growth of the business. Okay. Yeah. Obviously, having a clear end goal in mind of where they want to take the businesses, because especially if you have investors, investors will want to know
what's going to happen in the future.
Absolutely, and what's in it for them. Right. You know, what's the exit strategy? Whether is it trade sale, acquisition, IPO, and so on and so forth.
And many of them don't think about that at all. They just go out there, and many of them are very passionate. One thing they all in common is they're very passionate about what they do. That's right. But beyond passion, like you said correctly just now, they don't come up with very financial projections that make sense. Yes. Business plans that are probably not very realistic, perhaps. Perhaps. And not too clear about how they're going to move on from the initial excitement that they have. Yeah. And very commonly, like you say, is they can't explain to a potential investor where they're going to take them, number one. Number two, how are they going to exit?
Absolutely. So the storytelling of how the business is going to grow and where they're going to take it at the end of the day, the vision of the business is pretty weak, I would say. And I think above all that, it's also the understanding of, for example, the role of a company secretary with regards to, I would say, statutory requirements with regards to fundraising or even
choice
reporting.
Of entity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, and what's the role of it really? You know, in terms of what's the role of having a resolutions for specific decision making for a company? You know, what's the rights of shareholders, directors, and so on.
Well, there's a whole lot of things they need to know.
Yes, absolutely. You know, and we observe that it's more apparent in the younger companies because these are people who've just started out, who wants to embark on in businesses and want to run businesses. So I mean, we were there once before, but obviously we go through the process. But what's more apparent right now, because there's a lot of younger people now want to venture into their own businesses.
Right, that's increasing,
yes,
very much so.
Yes, increasing, especially nowadays, right? Yeah. So I think the need and the requirement to actually see where they can actually get this capacity building in terms of acquiring knowledge and perhaps support.
Yeah,
in these
support
areas.
is probably very, very key to their success.
Yes.
And I think what we want to do is to bring in the people with experience, yours, mine, and a couple of other people that we have, and then put it onto a platform that they can easily access to.
Correct.
Of course, I mean, there are a lot of courses on this, a lot of programs even provided by government on this, but there seems to be insufficient or maybe too costly, maybe it's just still not something that is sufficient for the startup community out there. So what I, Elain, wanted to do is to make it easy and simple for startups in a very economical way to be able to have access to this information. So we plan out some modules of online learning, mobile learning, so it's been readily available on our Hootie mobile learning platform. And we have chosen some topics. Maybe I'll just run through you some topics, and we had discussions on why some of these topics are useful information. So the mobile learning platform that we have designed has 8 modules. The first one is company administration and the role of company secretary, which is what you talked about just now. So what are some of the pertinent points that you think are important? You mentioned resolutions, understanding the role of the company secretary, and how do you use as company secretary to guide you. Actually, company secretaries are pretty experienced in the, I mean, they should be in the corporate matter, and I guess some of the startups perhaps don't know how to maximize the help that they can get from company secretary.
Correct, and also I guess the difference between the requirements of different entities. You know, what's the difference between sole proprietors, enterprises, Sdn Bhd companies, private limited businesses, limited liability partnerships. You know, what is the limitations, what the advantage and disadvantages, and if they opt to actually incorporate a private limited entity, then what are the responsibilities and the I would say there is not just responsibilities but also the obligations to shareholders, to directors, and reporting requirements and so on. So all these needs to be be known to them, and what we find that is that they are mostly ignorant on these matters, right? Even fundraising and what's important, what's the role of company secretaries in fundraising, for example.
Okay. Getting the right legal framework and the right resolution to authenticate that fundraising. Absolutely. You just can't go out in the streets and ask people for money.
That's right.
There must be rules and certain regulations they need to follow.
That's right.
So this will be covered in the first 2 modules, which is company secretary and the entity decision. Third module is on basic financial management. Now, I don't think we intend to teach people accounting or the entire thing, but I guess sufficient financial management to have some understanding of what is required in terms of understanding, build up the financial projections and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just that, Casey. I think what's important is that businesses need to know that once they start operating, right, sound financial management, keeping their management accounts,
cash flows,
and be sensitive on their cash flow management, keeping their management accounts updated, and then audited report and so on. Yeah.
I think the other aspect, which is not technical, is financial responsibility.
Yes.
And I'm sure you heard cases where people start up, manage to raise some funds, and next thing they do is to go and buy a BMW motorbike, something like that.
Yeah.
Right, so they need to be emphasized. Yeah. Now the other modules include business modeling and business plan. Obviously that's quite important.
Yes.
But the other one, which is not technical but really very important, is how do you build a team?
That's right.
And we have come across people started off nice, very nice, very exciting, very enthusiastic. Doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
Because they don't know how to work together well.
Yeah.
And typically they start off as friends and end up as enemies.
Yeah, I think that's what our observation is. I think people is managing people, as well as having good team dynamics. Is I think the most critical in any organization, because you can have the nicest business plans, you can come up with the most wonderful strategies, but working as a team, mobilizing it.
How to find a partner too.
Yes, absolutely.
A co-founder, how to find a funding partner maybe.
Yes.
What kind of criteria you need to look for, and these are things that some of them are quite, blank about this.
Yeah, and not everyone can be an entrepreneur.
Yep.
It takes a certain kind of, like you say, I think you talk about passion and also drive and perseverance, to be an entrepreneur,
Well, sometimes it's also where we have a startup, maybe a young person with some great ideas, all that, but desperately needs some funding. And here comes a guy who has the money, but he's not the right guy to be in the business. And that in the future could lead on to some issues and problems. So these are things that are quite commonly happening out there. The other thing we're going to cover in our 8th module is pitching, obviously very important, pitching for funding and funding strategies. What are some of the common challenges you find a startup has when it comes to pitching?
Yeah, I think what we most commonly come across is that sometimes the CEO of the company may not be the best person to pitch.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially if it's a technical, if the CEO is of a technical background. So what we observe is that if the CEO is of a technical background, he or she can actually,
go too deep technically.
Yes, and nobody understands him or her at the end of the day. Because especially when you're pitching for funds, there's different types of pitching.
Right.
There's a sales pitch. There's also an investment pitch, right? Right. So the obviously a sales or product pitch will be a lot different from investment pitch. And from the investment or fundraising pitching perspective, you would need to pitch the value proposition of why an investor should invest in a particular business. So you do not really need to go deep into the technical aspects of the business, but more of the business potential and the potential outcome and where the business is heading and the strategy, right? So many times what we observe, obviously the CEOs tend to pitch, but he or she may not be the best person, so it could be the CMO and so on. So the storyteller makes a lot of difference.
Significant difference. At the end of the day, it is not just a business. There was an article we just wrote about how SoftBank, Son invested in Alibaba and Jack Ma, and the story was he was not very, very impressed with Alibaba's business model at that point in time, but he was very impressed with Jack Ma's leadership and his ability to manage the team that he has. And that was making him put money down, I think it was 20 million or something like that, onto Alibaba. So there's a story well told, which leads on to us understanding this. If you're going to have a startup and you're going to be the founder, you're going to be the person doing this, you need to start really learning and acquiring the leadership required, because people invest in you, not just on your business.
Correct.
Yeah, and this is an area that I guess they need to learn. All right. So okay, you have just heard a short session on what we talk about in terms of the needs and the requirements of startups and what they're looking for, and from what we observe are some of the challenges faced by startups. And so we have developed a mobile learning program with 8 modules to cover these areas as we have described it. And it will be made available under the Hootie platform. Now, if you're interested to find out more, just click the button at the bottom of this video and you will have more information on what those modules will cover and whether it's something that you want to get your hands on that will help you in your journey to getting your startup going or taking your startup to a higher level. Once again, thank you, Elaine, for being here to support this. And this is once again a joint project between Plus and Quest Strategic Capital. Thank you very much.